The SOS, no one heard, shipwreck, survivors who vanished. Anyway, they did everything right. They survived the sinking, they had food, water, a lifeboat, and they sent a distress signal. But no one came, not because help wasn't nearby, but because no one heard them. This is what happens when survival isn't enough, and being found is the part everyone gets wrong. Most people believe surviving a shipwreck is the hardest part. They imagine the impact, the panic, the freezing water, and once you make it onto a lifeboat, they think the danger is over. But that's not how the ocean works, because survival and rescue are not the same thing. Survival is what keeps you alive. Rescue is what brings you home. And between those two things is where people disappear. Not because they died immediately, but because they were never found at all. There have been countless cases where survivors did everything right. They made it off the ship. They stayed together. They rationed supplies. They drifted, sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. And in some cases, they were never seen again. Not because they were far from help, but because they had no way to make themselves known. Imagine this. You're sitting in a lifeboat. The ocean is calm. The sky is clear. And somewhere over the horizon, a ship passes, close enough to save you, but too far to hear you. You scream. You wave. You try everything. But your voice disappears into wind and distance within seconds. And just like that, your chance is gone. They weren't lost. They were invisible. In other cases, survivors had signals, but used them at the wrong time. Flares fired too early. Mirrors never aimed correctly. Radios damaged or dead. And the most common failure of all, no sound signal. Because most people rely on visibility. They think someone will see them. But the ocean doesn't work that way. Waves hide you. Sunlight blinds rescuers. Distance shrinks you to nothing. And unless someone is already looking directly at you, you don't exist. Most distress signals fail for one reason. They depend on someone already searching. This is where things get worse. Because survival isn't just physical, it's psychological. The first day, there's hope. You believe rescue is coming. The second day, confusion starts to set in. Why hasn't anyone arrived? By the third day, something changes. Energy drops. Motivation fades. Silence begins. This is what survival experts rarely talk about. The quiet phase. This is when survivors stop trying to be found. They stop signaling. They stop shouting. They stop making noise. Not because they want to die, but because their brain starts through conserving energy. And in doing that, they become even harder to find. This is the mistake that turns survival into tragedy. They wait to be seen instead of forcing themselves to be heard. Because out there, being visible isn't enough. You can be within miles of rescue and still vanish. No whistle, no consistent signal, no way to cut through the noise of the ocean. Just silence. And silence doesn't get rescued. Search and rescue teams don't hear voices. They look for signals. They scan for flashes. They listen for patterns. They respond to something that stands out, not something that blends in. And a human voice blends in almost instantly. Wind absorbs it. Waves break it apart. Distance erases it completely. This is why people can disappear in open water, even when help is close, even when they did everything right. Offshore, your voice disappears in seconds. Wind, waves, distance. Most people believe they'll scream for help, but out there, no one hears you. And if no one hears you, you don't get found. The difference between survival and disappearance isn't strength. It isn't luck. It's whether or not you can be heard when it matters most. In survival situations, it's often assumed that the instinct to cry out for help will be enough to attract attention. However, the truth is starkly different. As the days drag on, fatigue sets in, and the determination that once burned brightly begins to wane. Those stranded at sea can become consumed by thoughts of despair and hopelessness. Instead of yelling at the top of their lungs, they reserve their energy, gradually succumbing to silence. They think, perhaps wrongly, that hope alone will bring someone to them. They forget that in their quiet solitude, every passing vessel might be unaware of their desperate predicament. Rescuers rely on the hope of signals heard above the relentless roar of waves and wind. But as silence takes hold, the reality of their situation becomes painfully clear. Being lost at sea requires more than mere survival instincts. It demands proactive measures to ensure they can still be found. They must think strategically, focusing on how to elevate their chances of being noticed rather than succumbing to the quiet despair permeating their minds. Every moment spent in hushed silence is a moment lost, with the ocean around them swallowing their cries and obscuring their existence. In those moments of critical choice, they must decide to break the spell of silence, a decision that could either save them or lead them further into invisibility. The struggle between desire to be rescued and the fatigue that weighs heavily upon them becomes an internal battle that plays out within the minds of those adrift in endless blue. The ticking clock brings with it a chilling urgency, as the real battle for survival shifts from mere existence to making oneself audible to the world beyond the waves. As days turn into indistinguishable stretches of time, the sun's relentless gaze becomes a double-edged sword, its warmth slowly fading alongside their hope. Survivors on board the lifeboat begin to grapple with the notion that memories of the life they knew may soon slip away, like grains of sand through their fingers. With the ocean stretching endlessly around them, the daunting thought lingers that they may never again feel the embrace of solid ground. Despite their efforts at survival, each passing hour hints at the fragility of their situation. They need to raise their voices and make a sound that can cut through the indifferent clamor of the sea, igniting urgency in distant hearts that might otherwise remain unmoved. Moments spent weighing their chances against the overwhelming silence jeopardize their futures, while echoes of their cries merge with the vastness around them, becoming little more than fleeting whispers lost to oblivion. As the sun dips below the horizon, a haunting darkness envelops the survivors in their lifeboat. The familiar sounds of the ocean are replaced by a deep stillness, amplifying their isolation. Each twinkling star above becomes a reminder of the lives they left behind, and the weight of uncertainty bears down on them. In the depths of their minds, desperation clashes with exhaustion, igniting an instinctive urge to make noise, a fight against their fading will. They realize now that the true battle lies not only in staying alive, but in ensuring their voices rise above the silence of the ocean, reaching out in a final plea for salvation. But as fatigue sets in deeper, so does a sense of futility. With each passing second, they begin to wonder if it's even worth the effort to call out, lost in the deceptive comfort of their lifeboat. The relentless water that surrounds them feels like an unyielding prison, swallowing their hopes along with the echoes of their past lives. Yet, deep within, a flicker of resolve ignites, a realization that silence can mean the end of hope itself. They scan the horizon, searching for any hint of a passing vessel, knowing they must muster the strength to break through the suffocating shroud of quietude. It's a painful choice, but one they must make, for remaining unheard leads to a fate worse than drowning. It seals their descent into eternity beneath the waves. In that desolate moment, as shadows stretched over the lifeboat, the survivors shared glances filled with unspoken understanding. They all felt the weight of the ocean pressing down on them, both physically and emotionally. Desperation ignited a surge of energy within. They collectively resolved to break the silence that threatened to consume them. With a shared nod, they raised their voices, calling out into the abyss, pushing against the vast emptiness around them. Each shout became a testament to their will to live, a defiance against the creeping despair that sought to suffocate their hope. In their cries, they found unity, a bond forged stronger than fear, a collective refusal to dissolve into the void. They would not be invisible today. As the night encroached around them, the echoes of their voices fought against the eternal silence, each sound pledging that they would not surrender their chance of salvation.